ओम त्यागेश्वरम रामकृष्णं शारदां मातृरूपिणीं विवेकानन्दमाचार्यं नत्वा वक्ष्यामि शुद्धे। ओम सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांति। In our last class, we discussed how Shruti Mata, she is our mother, more than our mother. She exhorts us, encourages us to strive to realize God, realize our own real nature, realize the Atman, the Self, in this very life itself, before the fall of this body. And for that, the mantra says that if one realizes the Self before the fall of this body, then one is freed from this transmigration, from this continuous cycle of birth and death. But if one fails to realize one's own self, then one has to be born in different lokas, in Manusya Loka, Swarga Loka, whatever, whichever Loka according to Yatha Karma Yatha Shritam, as are one's actions and one's thoughts. It is from earlier, this phrase Yatha Karma Yatha Shritam is from an earlier mantra. This mantra which we discussed, it only says that one has to be born again, one becomes fit to assume body in different lokas. The point was, we should strive to realize ourselves in this life itself before the fall of this body. And to further strengthen that, Shruti tells how in different lokas, this Manusya Loka, Brahma Loka, and in between so many lokas are there, Pitru Loka, Gandharva Loka, like that, what kind of vision of the self one can have. And the conclusion was, very distinct, clear vision of the self is possible only in Manusya Loka and Brahma Loka. Whatever lokas are there in between this Manusya Loka and Brahma Loka, those are all bhoga bhumis. The mind is preoccupied with enjoyments in those lokas and there is no inclination towards realizing the self. So only two lokas where this distinct vision of the self is possible. Manusya Loka and Brahma Loka, and the Brahma Loka is Dushprapa. It's extremely difficult to get to Brahma Loka. You need some very special rites and meditations. So best bet is this Manusya Loka itself. Here, Yatha Darshe Tathatmani. Just as one can see one's reflection very clearly, distinctly, in a clean mirror which is steady. One can see one's reflection very clearly. So the vision of the self is possible in human heart, in human antahkarana, in human mind. This vision of the self is possible. And hence one should strive one's best to realize God, to realize self in this very life. Now many scriptural passages tell us how this human life is a golden opportunity. Manushyatvam, Mumukshatvam, Mahapurusha Samshraya. These three are extremely difficult to get. One gets these through grace of God. And most of us, we all have got these. The devotees of Sri Ramakrishna, we have these. We have Manushyatva, we are born as human beings. We have Mumukshatva, we have desire to realize God. And we have Mahapurusha Samshraya. Mahapurusha Samshraya means shelter of the great souls. Now physically we may not be, but Sri Ramakrishna has sheltered us. And his words are always there with us. So we have all these three. Now it all rests on us. Sri Ramakrishna says, Guru, Krishna, Vaishnava, all three have blessed. All three have bestowed their grace. Now it is the grace of our own mind which we need. Our own grace. So these were the thoughts that were discussed in our last class. Now the next mantras, this is where the next few mantras, the Jnana Yoga part, the Vichara Marga of Advaita Vedanta. That is described there. So being Vichara Marga, it is difficult to understand, explain, practice in every way. But we will have a taste of it, how it is, what it is. And the Upanishad also tells what is the result of realizing one's own self. We realize one's own self, then what is the result? So the mantra is the first mantra of the 4-5 next mantras, which will deal with this Jnana Yoga, Vichara Marga, the path of reasoning. So it says, Indriyanam prithak bhavam udayastamayo chayat. Indriyanam prithak bhavam udayastamayo chayat prithak utpadyamananam matvadhiro nashochati. The result is matvadhiro nashochati. An intelligent person who realizes this, nashochati, goes beyond grief. And that is the result. Result of knowing God, result of knowing our own real nature, result of knowing the self, the Atman, Pratyagatman, whatever you call it, Brahman. The result is one goes beyond grief. Tarati shokam atmavit. Atmavit crosses over shoka. Matvadhiro na shochati. So those who want to cross over grief, shoka, this is for them. And what is it telling? In a way, it is telling us to analyze our own idea about ourselves, which is oft-quoted expression, who am I? So this analysis is about our own idea about ourselves. One may find it funny, we know about ourselves. There is what more is there to know about ourselves? The closest person to ourselves are we. So there is nothing new or more to know about ourselves. But when we think, we understand that we know very little about ourselves. So presently what we know about ourselves is we are this body, man, woman, tall, short, whatever you call it. Then we are the senses, we are the mind, that's all. That's all we know about ourselves. But there is one more factor which we don't say it explicitly, but we know it. We are conscious. We are conscious, and we are body, we are mind, we are senses, everything. Now this is where the fallacy is, in the sense our idea about ourselves is a mixture of truth and falsehood. There is some truth in what we think about ourselves, in what we think of ourselves. I'm not here talking of people who think themselves to be very great or small or not that way. A basic concept of everyone about oneself. Everyone thinks that I am a conscious being and I am this body, senses, mind and all that. Now this idea is a mixture of truth and falsehood. The consciousness part is true. That is the truth. Rest all is falsehood. That is what this mantra will establish. That our idea about ourselves is a mixture of truth and falsehood. And what is the falsehood part? That this mantra will tell us. And then we have to discount, segregate the non-essentials or non-self from our idea about ourselves, so that we arrive at the reality of our own being. So prithagutpadyamananam indriyanam prithak bhavam udayastamayo cha. To understand this bit of background of this Vedantic theory of creation or projection will help, but we won't go into the details of it. This mantra is telling that these senses, they have their origin from various sources of nature. And as such, they have an existence distinct from the self. The senses, Indriyas, they have their origin, their causes are in the nature, and they have existence distinct from the self. Prithak bhavam. The existence of the Indriyas and all that is distinct from the existence of the self. And also, they have their rise and fall. Udaya astamayo, utpatti pralayo. They have their rise and fall. Taking these two factors into consideration, we understand that these are not the intrinsic part of our existence. In this Indriyas, we also have to understand this body also. So this body, it is Sthula Sharira, gross body, and Sukshma Sharira. We can take these two together. We can take these two. Indriyas will represent Sukshma Sharira. Because Indriyas are generally 10. And mind, Antahkaran, the internal organ. So 11. These comprise, and Pancha Pranas, these comprise Sukshma Sharira. So, as I said, the Vedantic thought of creation, or Vedantic theory of creation, what it says, the whole manifested world of which this body and mind are the part, it has come from 5 basic elements. Akashad Vayu, Vayu Ragni, Agni Rapa, Adbyah Prithvi. So Akasha, Vayu, Agni, Apa, Prithvi. They are the 5 elements, basic elements of which the whole creation, permutation, combination is an evolute. Now these 5 have 2 modes, so to say. One is subtle and gross. So Akasha has 2 modes, one is subtle, 2 forms, so to say, one subtle and gross. So also Prithvi is subtle, there is subtle Prithvi, there is gross Prithvi and all that. Subtle Prithvi we can never perceive. Gross Prithvi can be perceived. So also subtle fire cannot be perceived, gross fire can be perceived. So these Pancha Bhutas, 5 basic elements, and there are 2 modes, so to say, the subtle and the gross. Out of that whole creation has come. Our body is the creation of the gross elements, Sukshma and Sthula Bhutas. Body is created out of gross elements, it is matter. It disintegrates and goes back into matter. So this is the source of this body, the gross elements which are matter. So also the Indriyas, we have 5 Nyandriyas, we have 5 Karmendriyas. Now see, the number is also 5 and there are Panchabhutas. I won't go into the details, but each of these Panchabhutas, out of it is created 1 Jnanendriya and 1 Karmendriya. 1 Jnanendriya, 1 object, 1 sense of 1 Indriya of knowing, and 1 Indriya, 1 Karana, 1 sense of acting. Pancha Jnanendriyas, Pancha Karmendriyas. From each one of the 5 elements, their subtle form, not the gross form, their subtle form. Out of these, 1 Jnanendriya and 1 Karmendriya have come. So out of Akasha, 1 Jnanendriya, Karanendriya has come, and 1 Karmendriya has come. Out of Prithvi, subtle part of Prithvi, Sukshma Prithvi, Tanmatra, 1 Jnanendriya and 1 Karmendriya has come. These are the source, origin of Jnanendriyas and Karmendriyas. So the Jnanendriyas, Karmendriyas, they have come out of the subtle Pancha Bhutas, Sukshma Pancha Bhutas. Again, these Sukshma Pancha Bhutas are matter. The point to understand is that. Then we have mind. Mind is a mixture of all the 5 Panchabhutas, all the 5 elements, all the 5 Bhutas. Their subtle form. Out of that, the mind and pranas have come. So these Panchabhutas, individually, they give rise, each one of them gives rise to 1 Jnanendriya, 1 Karmendriya. That's how out of 5 Panchabhutas, 5 Bhutas, we have 5 Jnanendriyas, 5 Karmendriyas. Then in the combined form, they give rise to Antahkarana, what we call mind or Buddhi, and the Panchapranas. So the whole of Sukshma Sharira, again, it has its origin from matter. The point to note is that the body, its origin is from matter. The senses, they are from Sukshma Bhutas, but matter. The mind is also from matter. Prithagutpadyamananam. They have been produced out of matter distinctly. And as such, they have to be distinct from the self. We don't have any origin. We as the conscious beings have no origin. This mind has the origin, this body has the origin, but we as the conscious beings have no origin. That is where the distinction is. And second very important part, Udayastamayo, Utpatti Pralayo. This body and the senses and the mind, they have their rise and fall. What do you mean by rise and fall? We can say our identification, our awareness of these entities called body, mind and all that has its rise and fall. Body actually doesn't fall, but our awareness of the body does fall. In the waking state, we are very much aware of the body. When we sleep, our awareness of the body falls. It rests, it sets. We are very much aware of our senses when we are awake. When we fall asleep, our awareness of the senses sets. Someone lights a fragrant incense sticks when we are sleeping. We don't get the fragrance. The senses, we are not aware of them. We are not aware of the body. They have their rise and fall. In the dream state, we are only aware of the mind. But in deep sleep state, even we are not aware of the mind. The awareness of the mind falls. And when we wake up from Sushupti, deep sleep, again the mind comes. Then the senses come. Then the body comes. So the body, senses, mind, they have their rise and fall. Udayastamayo, Utpatti Pralayo. And simultaneously we should deeply ponder that we are the witness of this rise and fall of body, senses and the mind. We are the witness of the waking state, and the same entity is the witness, experiences the dream. And the same entity experiences the Sushupti, deep sleep, comes back and says, I did not know anything. Which means I was there. So we as the conscious entity have no rise and fall. Whereas this body, senses and the mind, these have their rise and fall. So these are the points that a Jnana Yogi, a sadhaka of the Vichara Marga, has to ponder over. And remove from his or her understanding about his or herself these non-essentials, these non-selves. These have an existence that is entirely distinct from my existence. Their origin is distinct. They have the rise and fall. I am entirely distinct from these. Swamiji calls it de-hypnotization. Now we have hypnotized ourselves into thinking we are this body, mind and senses. Swamiji says we have to de-hypnotize ourselves, and that we have to do ourselves. This is not for telling anybody. This is not convincing others. This is convincing ourselves about our own real nature. Presently when I say this body, it will not work. We have to convince ourselves that there is a goof up here, that there is a mixture in my own understanding about myself of truth and falsehood. I have to convince myself about the falsehood. And then what is my real nature? That will remain, because it is already there. When the adventitious non-selves are removed from my understanding about myself, then what is my real nature? That will remain. That no one has to tell, no one has to again bring it. It's already there. So this is the Vichara Marga. As I said, this is difficult to understand, explain and practice, but this is what it is about. And the next mantra will tell us how to do it. How to do it. So that mantra, we have actually come across the same kind of mantras in earlier vallis. So Indriyebhya param mano manasah sattvam sattvadadi mahanatma mahato vyaktam uttamam avyaktat parah purusho vyapako linga evacha yam jnatva muchyate jantu amritatvam cha gacchati. So that is the process. Or so Bhashyakara says, when this is told that I am distinct from body, mind, senses, but where is that self? Where am I? Where is the locus of my being? Where is the truth of my being? Is it somewhere outside? I am not this body, mind, senses, okay, but where am I? Somewhere outside. The self, Atman, is it? Where is it? So this mantra tells that it is the inner self. It is our own inner self. We don't have to go outside, but we have to go within ourselves. In search of ourselves, we have to go within ourselves. And this self is called Alinga. Alinga means without any indications, without any distinctive marks, so to say. So we identify people, things with either those are small, big, white, red, whatever. But self has no such qualities. It's Alinga. It cannot be identified by any of the qualities. The only way it can be indicated, we can direct our mind towards the self, is this process from grosser to subtler, from subtler to subtlest. We are aware of the senses. This mantra tells mind is higher than the senses. Buddhi is higher than the mind. The Mahatvatva is higher than the Buddhi. Avyakta is higher than the Mahatvatva. And self is higher even than the Avyakta. This is a gradation, each from gross to subtle. The concept, these similar mantras had come. So the concept of higher is that which is sukshma, subtle, vyapaka, pervasive, and pratyekatma bhuta, nearer to the self. So whichever is more subtle, more pervasive, and nearer to the self is higher. That's how this gradation of sthula and sukshma happens. This is how we have to lead our mind from gross to subtle, from subtle to subtler, subtler to subtlest. That's how it goes. And we will see next class. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.